Hey, I'm Dan from RV Leaguers, and this is Reels on Wheels. Today, we're talking about the MCU, and not just talking about it, ranking it. In my last video, I started with my bottom 10 MCU films, and in this one, I'm following up with my top 10. The MCU is one of the most expansive franchises in history, and it's one of my all-time favorites, so I was really excited to dig into these films, and with the bottom 10 out of the way, we can now get to the really good stuff. But I don't want to leave you hanging, so I'm going to put my list right out front. At number 10, I've got Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. The second installment of Guardians picks up right where the first left off, with a fun adventure that capitalizes on the crew's distinct personas. The movie manages to play off the Peter's father is a planet story pretty convincingly, while further developing other relationships, namely that between Nebula and Gamora, and a surprisingly powerful connection between Rocket and Yondu. The theme of fatherhood and Peter's realization that Yondu was his real daddy all along as he makes the ultimate sacrifice lends the film some added gravitas. Overall, this was a satisfying follow-up to the outstanding first outing, so it grabs a spot in my MCU top 10. Oh, and who doesn't love Baby Groot?
Push this button, because that will set off the bomb immediately and we'll all be dead.
I am Groot.
Mm-hmm.
I am Groot.
Uh-huh.
I'm Groot.
At number 9, I've got Spider-Man Homecoming. Spider-Man finally comes home in a film that portrays Peter as a believable high school student with high school issues like field trips, crushes, dances, and all that good stuff. Putting aside that timeline-destroying 8 years later flub, the film fits perfectly into the MCU, following up on Peter's inclusion in Civil War, with Iron Man taking a mentorship role over Peter, from a distance at least. Michael Keaton's Adrian Toomes starts out moderately interesting as a working man turned to crime after getting crushed by the big guys like Stark, but the twist with him being Liz's father and the tense confrontation between Peter and him just before the titular dance elevates the drama behind the movie's third act. It's great to have Spidey in the MCU. Tom Holland was great casting, and even though Spider-Man is technically dead as of the making of this video, I am looking forward to his next outing, Far From Home.
Yeah, people know who I am.
Bullshit, they know the guy from the bird suit.
You want to get nuts? Yeah. Come on, let's get nuts.
Oh, hey, no, wait!
At number 8, I've got Thor Ragnarok. This film was a triumphant redemption for the MCU's, at that time, least beloved and most clunky franchise. Marvel's bold choice in hiring director Taika Waititi paid major dividends as he infused the film with his trademark comedic style while also delivering spectacular visuals, including imagery and story from the famous Planet Hulk storyline. Tessa Thompson was also a great addition to the story as the no-nonsense Valkyrie. Her chemistry with the rest of the cast was much better than Natalie Portman's ever was, and Jeff Goldblum added another marquee role to his illustrious career, here as the Grandmaster. I don't put this film higher on my list mostly because I think while the comedy was outstanding, it ultimately did take a bit away from the more dramatic and serious aspects of the film, namely the confrontation with Hela, Thor's sister, the death of Odin, and the destruction of Asgard. So while it was incredibly fun to watch and packed full of laughs and action, it can't quite reach the level of the films ranked above it on this list.
I'm made of rocks, as you can see, but don't let that intimidate you. You don't need to be afraid unless you're made of scissors. Just a little rock, paper, scissors joke for you. Piss off, ghost! He's freaking gone.
At number 7, I have Guardians of the Galaxy. This film was Marvel Studios' first big risk on a more obscure set of characters. The movie also faced the task of balancing an ensemble cast, including the seemingly out-of-place Chris Pratt as Star-Lord, at the time notable for his roles in comedy and completely outside the realm of action. But the film over-delivered and managed to develop each of its main characters so that by the end, we cared when a talking tree sacrificed himself. We sympathized with a raccoon subjected to cruel experiments. We felt the pain of a husband and father who'd lost his family. We rooted for the daughter of the mad titan trying to stop another atrocity. And we cheered when the orphan scoundrel danced in the face of death. The film also sets itself apart through its use of music to connect with the audience. We hear the songs the characters are hearing, and it allows us to get more involved in the story and sets the tone throughout. The film is hilarious and features some exciting Star Wars-esque action sequences, and really only suffers from a fairly generic villain in Ronan. The MCU's first major foray into the many galactic adventures we've seen in the comics prove that the story can move beyond Earth as long as they remain focused on the characters.
By your powers combined, I am Captain Planet! Go Planet! The power is yours!
At number 6, I have the Avengers. When you think of the MCU, you think Avengers. The film that proved not only was a superhero team-up movie possible, but also that it could actually be great. We get our heroes brought together in the first act, each bringing their own personality and perspective to the conflict. Disagreements between them highlight their differences, which allows the audience to better get to know them. And by the end, we see at least a couple of the key players grow from their disagreements, with Cap realizing that he may have a naive perspective on the modern, unfamiliar world, and Tony accepting his role and being willing to make the sacrifice play, taking that nuke through the wormhole. By pitting the Avengers against the familiar and formidable Loki, the film also features a villain with a personal connection to at least one of the heroes. And of course, we got a thrilling climax with excellent action and one of the most iconic shots in cinematic history. Yeah, you know the one. That being said, with all respect to this groundbreaking film, it does fall outside of my top 5.
You've managed to piss off every single one of them.
That was the plan.
Not a great plan. Not a great plan.
At number 5, I have Captain America: Civil War. The third installment of the Cap franchise, but really a movie with a grand scale like the Avengers films, ranks just above the first Avengers film because it was more than just our heroes teaming up to battle a common enemy. The film features a philosophical schism between our heroes, with the personal drama of Cap's relationship with Bucky intertwined. The conflict over the Sokovia Accords divides our heroes on the question of government oversight and direction of their activities, and in the midst of all this, the film seamlessly introduces T'Challa, the Black Panther, and throws Spider-Man into the mix. But ultimately, what elevates this film is not the blockbuster airport fight scene, but the more personal story and the smaller scale battle that takes place after. We see the tragic disillusion of Steve and Tony's friendship. Steve's loyalty is taken to its limits, as he can't possibly betray his one old friend, the only friend he has left from his previous life. Tony, meanwhile, is devastated to find that his trust was betrayed by one of the few people he probably never thought would. And Bucky is caught in the middle. He is the catalyst, the perpetrator of terrible acts, but also a victim. The villain, Zemo, was not out for power or a throne, and his means weren't by force or an army. He meant only to destroy the Avengers by exposing the truth, forcing alliances and relationships to shatter, and the ramifications of his efforts reverberated all the way through Infinity War.
I could do this all day.
At number 4, I've got Iron Man. With a stellar first outing, one of the greatest franchises in history was born, and director Jon Favreau provided a formula for the perfect balance of action, comedy, and drama that we now expect from MCU films. Anchored by RDJ's legendary portrayal and total embodiment of Tony Stark, this film delivers the compelling story of the spoiled son of a wealthy family who inherits an empire but is faced with the harsh reality that he's living on blood money. The film's theme reverberates throughout the MCU, as Tony tries to make something good of his life after it was saved and seeks redemption for the tragedies caused by the weapons with his name on them. While providing the action you want out of a summer blockbuster, it also includes the attention to character development that allows the audience to truly connect with the story. This includes the villain Obadiah Stane, whose evil motivations are still rational, even if a bit generically greedy and power-hungry. Overall, Iron Man is a standalone great film, but when you consider that nothing came before it, and note how the rest of the Phase 1 MCU films were much more of a mixed bag, you can see just how influential and important it was to this franchise, and that's why it earns this spot on my list.
I am Iron Man.
I've made some upgrades of my own!
That'll be $60.
At number 3, I have Black Panther. In the year of Avengers Infinity War, this solo outing, directed by Ryan Coogler, turned out to be the breakout hit. This is a complete film with close attention paid to creating a vibrant world within which our characters can live and grow. Wakanda is as much a character as the rest, with music and garb drawn from various real African cultures to create a beautiful tapestry. This is truly something special, at once within the MCU, but also creating a world that feels real on its own by showcasing and celebrating African history and culture. In T'Challa, we have a superhero king who actually struggles with the responsibilities of being a king, and ultimately has to face the reality that his father's legacy is not what he thought it was. The story is bolstered by two entertaining and even compelling villains, with Andy Serkis's manic Ulysses Klaue and Michael B. Jordan's powerful Killmonger, who challenges the audience to grapple with his worldview. On top of this, Black Panther includes excellent action sequences, like the James Bond-esque casino scene, which features engaging camera work that follows the action and fully immerses the audience. In its climactic showdown, the film also infuses what could have been another somewhat generic fight between a hero and a villain with the same power set, with a tangible personal conflict and the somber end to Killmonger's tragic life. Ultimately, it's the excellent performances from the ensemble cast portraying well-rounded characters and brilliant attention to world building that anchor one of the MCU's best entries.
I never freeze. Like here.
At number 2, I have Avengers Infinity War. What even needs to be said about Infinity War? The triumphant culmination of a 10-year story where the Russo brothers managed to balance almost all of the beloved major characters in the MCU while delivering an iconic villain in Thanos. That's one of the movie's greatest triumphs. Thanos is now a household name. Marvel knew that after developing their heroes for 10 years, they could devote a significant portion of the movie, more than any other character, to their big bad. This allowed the audience to get a glimpse of Thanos' past, understand his motivation, and follow him almost like one would traditionally follow the protagonist. And Josh Brolin's performance through motion capture breathed life into the CGI villain with humanity and depth. The movie managed to live up to overwhelmingly high expectations, with excellent team-ups between the heroes, including some familiar pairings, as well as some new dynamics between characters who had never met. I mean, we didn't know we needed the Black Widow and Okoye team-up, but we did. And seeing Tony Stark butt heads with Doctor Strange emphasized the differences between these two seemingly similar characters. And even with less time for some characters, each still got to have their moments, such as Cap's sheer will and glorious beard shining through, and Groot finally stepping up and using a part of himself to form Stormbreaker's handle. I appreciated how Thanos clearly wanted to push each of his opponents to their limits before ultimately defeating them, rather than simply wiping them out with the powers of the Infinity Stones straight away. He's a brawler, as we can see in the fight with Hulk, and that gave the movie some of the best fight sequences, especially when he faced off against Doctor Strange and later Iron Man. We've spent 10 years with Tony Stark, watching him grow, attempting to prepare for the final threat, but after adding one of his most epic suit-ups ever with the Mark 50, his most advanced armor ever, when he finally faces Thanos one-on-one, he does all that for a drop of blood. We fear that Thanos might end his life, but even when he survives, it's heartbreaking to watch him cradle a dying Peter as his ultimate failure dawns on him. Alongside all the massive payoffs for diehard MCU fans, what really sets this one apart is the bold choice of ending the film with Thanos' victory and the snap. Of course, we know that many of the characters will return, but the characters don't know that, and Infinity War really does feel like a standalone film, where the heroes simply lost. That final shot of Thanos watching the sunrise on a grateful universe has a finality to it, and our heroes are left to pick up the pieces.
Did you do it?
Yes.
What did it cost?
$1 million.
At number 1, I have Captain America, the Winter Soldier. The Russo brothers' first outing in the MCU shows just why the studio entrusted them to take on their biggest project subsequently. The film perfectly utilizes Cap's status as a man out of time, facing real modern issues such as government surveillance and what patriotism really means. Thrust into the middle of a conspiracy thriller, Cap discovers that trusted institutions may not be what they seem, and identifying an enemy may not be as simple as it was during World War II. On top of that, the film delicately balances the high-stakes Hydra conspiracy with Cap's personal struggle, finding that his best friend did not pass away, but was actually turned into the murderous Winter Soldier at Hydra's command. Following Cap confronting these issues, the film shows just why he is such a beloved character. Where the first Avenger was pretty straightforward, good guy, big heart, fights obvious evil, this film asks Cap and the audience to think a bit harder and dig deeper. After all, what does it mean to be Captain America in modern times? It's not just following the flag, but standing up for the principles and highest ideals. It means protesting injustice, questioning those entrusted with power, and taking action even in the face of enormous opposition. At the same time, it manages to deliver action and excitement similar to other great spy movies. This is when Captain America's power set is utilized best. The film features great action sequences, showcasing his abilities from the very outset when he, Black Widow, and their team take the vessel from Batroc. He's not the most powerful hero. He doesn't have high-tech gadgets, or godlike strength, or special powers, which allows him to feel like an underdog at times, and we can really root for him when he gets betrayed and ganged up on in an elevator, or gets shot and beaten by Bucky. And in the midst of all this action, the film provides a character study on Cap through his words and actions. He continues to visit his old love, Peggy Carter, now suffering from Alzheimer's disease, demonstrating his deep sense of loyalty and devotion. Cap disagrees with Project Insight because it's not freedom, but order through fear, demonstrating that his sense of patriotism is intertwined with his belief in freedom, and he's willing to fight to preserve it. But in the end, he refuses to fight Bucky, even if it means he'll be killed, because he firmly believes that he can and must try to save his friend, even if it means making the ultimate sacrifice. And it's the climax that proves that the best superhero and action films don't always have to have the biggest blockbuster battle at the end. The action here takes place on and around 3 helicarriers, and quickly narrows its focus to the final confrontation between Cap and Bucky. The tension and stakes are at their peak. If Cap fails, that means he has done so doubly, both at stopping Hydra from killing millions, and at redeeming his best friend. Ultimately, this film stands above all the rest because it is able to accomplish so much by focusing on a smaller scale conflict that feels grounded and realistic to a modern audience, hinging on notions of trust and loyalty, both in our personal relationships and in our important institutions.
Internet, so helpful.
So there you have it, that's my MCU Top 10. This was really a labor of love for me, and I had a great time making this video because I truly enjoy all of the films on this list. And especially at the end, what stratified them was very little. But what do you think? Did I get it right? Did I leave some of your favorites out? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more videos coming up.